we're going to start with the media days, right? So like I said, 2021, Michigan was kind of defending their beat Ohio talk that was going on, right? They had the banner up in the facility about what are you doing to beat Ohio State? I think the quote was, we're going to beat Ohio State or die trying, right? And there was a lot of skepticism, of those comments. They come out and do it. 2022 is very much about the quarterback controversy, maybe a little bit of Jim Harbaugh's NFL flirtation as well, but it was kind of a prove it year again, right? Cool. We saw what you did in 2021, but Hutchinson's gone. You don't even know who your quarterback is. What are you guys going to do? That's not the case in 2023. Michigan is showing up to Big Ten media days, back-to-back Big Ten champions. And all expectations are they're going to be a top 4 team starting the season, and they have a national championship caliber team this year. So let's start first with who will be attending for Michigan and anything you think that means or any comments you want to make about these players. I was not shocked to see Chris Jenkins, Mike Sainristil, and Blake Corum being Michigan selections to represent at Big Ten Media Days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you've got pretty much an endless list of guys that you can pick to represent your program there. I mean, a guy like JJ could have been there. Mike Barrett could have been there. I mean, there's just so many guys that you could have picked and would have been like, all right, yeah, that's a good pick. And these 3 guys are, excellent representations of your program. And, a guy like Mike Sainristil, who's kind of built himself into who he is, from both sides of the ball. So, really not shocking to see those 3 guys do it. I mean, again, Harbaugh had an endless selection of guys that he could have picked. And I'm actually surprised. I am a bit surprised that he didn't pick JJ, but, maybe that happens next year. But either way, it's not like, it's not a
after everything that happened last year when he sent Cade.
Yeah.
Right? And everyone deciding that meant that was the end of the quarterback competition, right? He's probably, it used to be like a senior thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like captainship in general, like that's another big thing, right? These 3 guys probably have a good chance of being captain, right?
Yep.
I'm with you. You probably could have selected another half dozen dudes, but those 3 in particular are guys that turned down the NFL, came back to Michigan, but again, you could throw Zinter, Cornelius Johnson, a lot of guys into that group as well, right?
Yeah.
I think of the group, Sainristil was really impressive last year making the change as a leader, but if you've been following along with like the Michigan Made series or anything else that Michigan has been putting out, a guy that's really stuck out to me in terms of leadership has been Chris Jenkins.
Yep.
So I'm not shocked to see him there, not shocked if he's a captain, but tell me if I'm wrong. It kind of feels like this is kind of becoming Chris Jenkins' team in some ways.
Yeah, I know Michigan. Michigan has some really strong leaders on defense. I mean, you can point to Mike Sainristil's speech at coming out of halftime against Ohio State that really spurred the defense on. And Chris Jenkins again. I mean, he wanted to become more vocal, and he certainly is. I mean, Michigan has some really solid leaders, and just so happens that a good majority of them come on the defensive side. And I'm not saying it's an issue on offense. I'm just saying that's just how it happened. And, that's not a big deal. But again, 2 guys who really represent the program, who care for Michigan and want to take Michigan over that last hump, which is, now it's the semifinal talk, getting over that semifinal talk. And that was a big thing for a major motivation for all those guys who returned, Zinter, Keegan, Corum, Sainristil, all those guys. I mean, they were really like one of the big driving factors was to get over this hump and compete for a national championship. And, they have all the tools to do it. Everything is in place. I mean, they have some question marks, but the question marks that Michigan have, I bet 95% of the programs in this country would like to have those kind of question marks that they have. I mean, it's just, that's,
you don't know who your second corner might be, and that's it.
Right. Exactly. So it's funny how, that kind of issue is it's just how well Michigan is set up for this year. And obviously, they got to get it done. But, as far as, as Chris Jenkins goes, I mean, absolutely. It's, I would not be shocked if he's a captain. I mean, Michigan could have like 6 captains this year and it'd be totally fine. So, I mean, the more leaders you have, the better. But those 3 guys are, pretty much as good as it gets from a representation standpoint.
I think you're right too, as far as just the story of Michigan football, right? Like what Jim Harbaugh likes to sell about his program. Jenkins was a guy that came in as either an underrated, inside interior guy, or maybe a mispositioned, overrated outside guy. He was a tweener, right? Anything you could do to knock him, right? And it's going to take 3 to 4 years for him to develop. And he was a solid contributor sooner than I think people thought. But now he is who we said he could be, and far beyond that, right? He's going to play at like 320 pounds probably, right? The guy's an absolute monster. And I think he has every chance, it's crazy to say, but to not only meet, but possibly surpass Mozzie Smith in terms of on-field production and even NFL draft pick, right? Like we've heard this a couple times now, and I've told you, I talked to a scouting buddy, and it just, this keeps coming up, that when NFL scouts were watching Mozzie's film, they kept being drawn to Jenkins, right? So he's a guy on a lot of people's radar, and if he's adding this leadership chip to that equation, I think that's going to be great for him. Like you said with Sainer, still we've seen him before fired up, and Blake Corum, again, just another guy that says and does all the right things in terms of that Michigan man, not what it's kind of become, like Michigan only hires people connected to Michigan, but like literally right, what Michigan wants to say they're creating when guys get through the program, right? So you touched on it though. The expectations piece. Mm-hmm. They were kind of trying to convince people of the talk the last couple years, and now they've got to own it, right? They've pretty much said natty or bust.
Yeah.
I do think if they won a playoff game and lost in the national championship, that would feel really bitter in the moment, but I think that's something they might be able to grapple with over time. But we saw Georgia last year after they win, and everybody's like, you said we were going to be 5-7 and nobody believed in us. Like, so corny, right? Yeah. Nobody was saying that, right?
No one said that.
Yeah. So Michigan's not trying to create the fake underdog chip, right? They're going all in on, they know what the expectations are. And that's going to be kind of the theme of the season, starting with the Big Ten Media Day. So how do you think they begin to own that? After losing 2 straight playoff games, I mean, again, you've beaten Ohio State, you've won the Big Ten, mm-hmm. but now if you don't do it, you start getting compared to maybe Bob Stoops, Oklahoma, some of those Clemson before they got over the hump, whatever.
Right. Yeah. I mean, how do you own it? I mean, that's the $1 million question. I mean, they said, they mentioned basically, last year that, they were just happy to be there. That was the big thing, that they were just, happy to be there against Georgia, happy to just be representing their beating Ohio State, doing all that stuff. Last year against TCU, it was kind of more of a, this was a missed opportunity, and everyone in the program will admit that. And now they're at the point where they're saying, okay, well, we need to, this is the next hump that they need to get over. They got over the Ohio State one. They got over the Indianapolis one. I mean, obviously you got to get over one to get to the other, and now, the expectation is to not just be happy to be there, to happy to have a seat at the table. You want to be the head of the table. And obviously that's Georgia, and, to compete and to be amongst the big boys, you got to beat the big boys. So now that's what Michigan's mission is. I mean, this year and beyond. It's not just a 1-year window here. I mean, this might be Michigan's best window to beat a team like Georgia. I mean, we don't really know what next year is going to look like. There's a lot of variables involved, but when you look at Michigan's depth chart from top to bottom, the experience, the leadership, it might not get as good as what it is right now. And so this is the window to do it. And, and these guys aren't naive. They know what this is. They know what's at stake. They're not satisfied with what happened against TCU. They're not going to be like, oh shucks, we'll get them next time. No, they wanted to win, and they're going into this season wanting to be better prepared, not making mistakes in crucial moments, the mistakes that they didn't make all year that they made against TCU. They want to avoid that, and how they do that, I mean, that's up to them to figure out. But again, this window is, it might shut quick right after this year, or it might be slowly closing. But you're talking from an opportunity standpoint. The time is right now, and you never know. I mean, if they do end up, making it to the national championship game and beating Georgia, I mean, I don't know if that'll happen. Then the window probably becomes wide open again, because now you're amongst the big boys, and that changes everything, when it comes to recruiting and transfer portal and NIL, all that stuff. So, you got to have one before the other. And, I think right now, coming into this with expectations, that you're a national brand and you can compete on a national level. Now you got to go out there and prove it. Obviously one game at a time first, and you got to beat Ohio State all over again and do the whole thing. But, the opportunity might not be as good as it is right now. So you got to take advantage of it while you can. And, you can't be complacent. You can't just say, well, we're back-to-back Big Ten champs. No one can touch us. No, that's not how it works. And they've been pretty open about, not being complacent and not just being happy to be there. They want to, get that seat at the table and have a permanent place at it. So this is the year to do it. They've got all the pieces to do it. And they just got to, I mean, at this point, they just got to get it done. I mean, there's no other way to say it. They just got to get it done.
No, I think that's fair. And that's an interesting level of pressure too. Right. But yeah, no, I do think there is a window. Not that like they won't be this good again, but this feels like an era of sorts, right? 21, 22, and 23 feel like they're always going to kind of be connected. And we know Michigan's goal, along with beating Michigan State, beating Ohio State, Big Ten daddy, right, is to have the most players ever drafted in a single NFL draft. And, we already saw was it the East-West Shrine game?
Yeah.
Right. The amount of players, 7 Michigan offensive linemen. I mean, the amount of guys that are already being targeted by these offseason folks in terms of NFL, that we know the roster's loaded. So there's really just no more excuses. And that's part of it too. Yep. I do think they're going to be able to reload and continue this path that they've started. But what they do next year, probably, even if JJ comes back, a lot of the team is going to look really different. Right. So I do think, they kind of thought they were going to win against TCU and expected to, and kind of had a look ahead attitude or whatever it might be. They made mistakes they normally haven't made. And I think injuries cost them. And I'm not trying to make injuries an excuse. Every team deals with injuries, but Michigan was playing with, now we know Donovan Edwards didn't have just one bad hand, but one bad leg.
Right.
No Blake Corum. Schoonmaker gets hurt at the start of that game. So